Did you know that your home, the place where everything is supposed to be peaceful and trustworthy, could be filled with signs screaming a truth you refuse to see? Unfaithful women don't walk around with a visible label, nor do they shout from the rooftops what they're doing. No, they become experts at hiding their intentions and manipulating reality. But there's one thing they can never hide: their habits. Those small yet powerful changes speak far more than they realize. If you think this is just paranoia, let me tell you something. The final lesson in this video will completely change your perspective. And if you dare to watch it all, you might see things you never imagined in the person you thought you knew. I'm Celia, and in this video, I'm going to show you the clearest signs of a woman being unfaithful when she comes home. Stay until the end, because the final revelation could be the most shocking of all. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself if you truly know the person you live with? You might spend your days with her, sharing the same bed, the same house, but something could be happening beneath the surface that you're completely missing. The first crucial point I need you to understand is this: a sudden change in attitude. That strange calmness, that inexplicable distance that starts creeping into her presence when she comes home, is not just a coincidence or a bad day. It's one of the clearest signs that something is happening, something you don't want to see or maybe prefer not to see. Think about this. Years ago, when she came home, your wife would greet you with a smile, with a loving gesture. It was the same house, the same day, yet everything felt different. But now, something has changed. Suddenly, that smile has become a mask, and what used to feel familiar and warm has turned into a distant place, somewhere you don't know if she's completely absent or just hiding something from you. This indifference, this change in attitude, is much more than just a bad day. When a woman starts acting like this, when her tone of voice turns cold for no apparent reason, when her eyes seem to be looking somewhere else, it's not just an emotional fluctuation. It's the trace of someone who has emotionally disconnected from you. Let me tell you a story. I know Andrew, a man in his 60s, who at first thought everything was fine in his relationship. His wife, Laura, used to be loving, always asking about his day, making his coffee, laughing with him at the end of the day. But over time, something changed. Laura started coming home with a coldness, as if the place no longer belonged to her, as if she didn't want to be there. At first, Andrew thought it was stress, that maybe she was tired from work or just going through a rough patch. But over time, the signs became too clear. There were no more affectionate touches, no more of those little gestures that used to be their routine. And the most painful part, there was no conversation, only a wall of silence. When he asked her if something was wrong, her answer was always the same: "Nothing, I'm fine." But Andrew already knew something didn't add up, and the silence in his home spoke louder than 1,000 words. What Andrew didn't understand at first is that indifference is not just a sign of boredom or fatigue, it's a sign of emotional disconnection. A woman who starts to act distant is not just busy or stressed. She's losing the connection. She's looking for a way out of the relationship. And even though in her mind she justifies it by saying, "Everything is fine," deep down, she's so emotionally distant she doesn't even know how to come back. If you watching this video feel identified, if you've ever experienced this sudden change in your wife's attitude, you need to start understanding that this is not something trivial. It's not. And don't fool yourself. Don't ignore the signs out of fear that your life might fall apart. What good is it to live hoping everything will fix itself? What good is it to wait for her to be the person she once was if you're not even demanding her to be honest with you? What you're allowing is for your life to continue being a lie, an illusion that drags you into emotional mediocrity. It's time to face it. It's time to see the truth without fear. That coldness, that distance, it's not normal. And it's not just a bad day. It's a serious problem, a reflection of something much bigger going on inside her. Don't wait any longer to confront it, because if you let it go, you'll keep living in a lie that eats away at you from the inside. The truth may hurt, but breaking free from that lie is the first step to taking control of your life. Stop ignoring the signs. Your wife's indifference when she comes home is not something you should let become part of your normality. It's the beginning of an emotional distance, that, if not addressed in time, can lead you down a path of unnecessary pain and suffering. We've talked about the coldness and emotional distance that starts to occur when a woman disconnects. But this isn't the only silent habit that can ruin a relationship. The next major problem, the second key point of this video, has to do with constant vigilance over her phone. Something as simple and everyday as a device, something that at first glance seems harmless, can be the key to an infidelity tearing you apart from the inside without you even noticing. When a woman starts being territorial with her phone, when she holds it with too much caution, quickly puts it away when you walk into the room, or even becomes irritated if you ask to see something on her screen, it's because there's something she's trying to hide. And it's not just about privacy, it's about creating a barrier, a much deeper emotional distance. Because in the mind of someone who's being unfaithful, the phone becomes a lifeline, the tool that allows them to maintain the facade of normality while leading a secret life. The messages, the apps, the calls you never hear, everything is stored there, like a corner you can't access. And the worst part is, this isn't a matter of momentary distrust or insecurity. It's a pattern that, if ignored, can destroy all the trust in a relationship. This doesn't just affect the relationship, it affects the dignity and emotional autonomy of the one being ignored. Because from a psychological standpoint, this kind of behavior is a clear sign of emotional manipulation. The fact that the phone becomes a minefield, an impenetrable space, is a clear indication that something is wrong. The person who feels the need to hide their digital life from their partner is, consciously or not, manipulating the relationship. It's not just an act of evasion, it's a form of control. Control over what you can know, over what you can discover, and ultimately, over what is being kept from you. This game of hiding and showing, of keeping secrets while continuing with daily routines, is a form of emotional distancing, even more dangerous than visible indifference. In Stoic philosophy, we know that truth and transparency are fundamental pillars for achieving inner peace. We cannot live in peace if we are buried in lies or concealment. The Stoics spoke of the importance of autarky, emotional self-sufficiency, of being true to oneself and others. If a person begins to hide aspects of their life, even if they are small at first, they are, in some way, giving themselves permission to betray that inner honesty which is crucial for any real and lasting bond. And the relationship, if not based on transparency and mutual respect, becomes a minefield of distrust and despair. It's important to understand that it's not just a phone being hidden, it's the very essence of the relationship. The moment the phone becomes an unbreakable wall, what it's doing is separating two worlds, the one she wants you to see and the one she's actually living. This habit of guarding her phone is a manifestation of a deeper emotional disconnection. It's a way of avoiding facing the reality of the relationship, of shielding herself from confrontation. And while you continue living in ignorance, hoping everything will resolve itself, she's building a wall between you, one that over time will be nearly impossible to tear down. I invite you to reflect. Have you ever noticed that her behavior with her phone has changed? Have you ever felt disconnected while she remains more and more in her digital bubble? This barrier is not just a protective measure for her, but a form of control that is taking away your right to know the truth. And if you let it go, the distance will only grow, the distrust will take root even more deeply, and what could have been a small crack will turn into an abyss separating your worlds. The only way to stop this decay is to set clear boundaries, to face the reality that the truth must always come first. Emotional peace can only be achieved when trust and honesty are present, and neither of them can thrive when one person is hiding their life inside their phone. We've already talked about emotional coldness and the control created through the phone, two clear signs that something isn't working in the relationship. But now, let's address something that's probably affecting you more than you realize, the disappearance of emotional intimacy. This is the third point of this video, and it's key to understanding how what once was a genuine connection is slowly crumbling. When intimacy is lost, It's not just desire that fades. It's the very essence of the relationship, and without it, everything else becomes superficial. Emotional intimacy isn't just about sharing a hug or kind words. True intimacy is when two people feel free to be vulnerable, when they can talk about their fears, their dreams, their frustrations, without fear of judgment. But when one of them shuts down, when they're no longer interested in the other's well-being, the relationship starts to fall apart. And if we analyze this from a practical and philosophical standpoint, we see that the lack of emotional intimacy is, in many cases, the first step toward an irreversible disconnection. The logic behind this disconnection is simple. When a person stops feeling like they have a safe space in their relationship to share what's on their mind and heart, they start looking for that space outside the relationship. Why? Because humans need to feel heard, need to feel important to someone. And if they can't find that at home, they will search for it elsewhere. The lack of emotional intimacy doesn't just affect the relationship itself. It creates a void within the person who no longer feels valued, ultimately pushing them toward other sources of validation. Let's put this into context. Think about Andrew, the same man from before. For years, he and Laura shared a deep connection. They weren't just partners, they were companions, friends. But over time, Laura began to shut down. She was no longer interested in hearing about his day or taking time to talk about the deeper topics they used to share. Andrew tried to talk to her, to share his own frustrations, but she always responded evasively or simply changed the subject. What used to be a fluid conversation had now turned into a monologue from Andrew, while Laura withdrew further into her own world. Andrew started to feel invisible, as if his thoughts and emotions no longer mattered. And over time, that led him to ask himself, what's the point of even trying? This pattern is more common than you think. Emotional intimacy becomes an invisible barrier when there's no longer interest in sharing what truly matters with the other person. And although it may seem subtle, this lack of emotional connection can turn the relationship into an empty routine where two people share a physical space but not an emotional one. And the worst part is that without that intimacy, the relationship slowly disintegrates. The good news is that this can be reversed, but not without effort and awareness of what's happening. The key here is to reconnect. If you feel that emotional intimacy has disappeared, the best strategy is to start deep conversations, without rushing, without pressure, where the goal isn't just talking for the sake of talking, but genuinely listening and sharing. This requires vulnerable openness from both sides. But at first, it can start with just one. If you're the one feeling disconnected, take the first step. Start by expressing what you feel, but in a way that invites the other person to do the same. This isn't about giving a monologue where you only talk about yourself. It's an invitation for both of you to open up and truly listen to each other. It can be as simple as saying, I've noticed we don't talk as much as we used to. I'd like to know how you feel about this. Or, I want you to know how I've been feeling lately. Opening up, even if it feels uncomfortable at first, is the bridge that can help you regain what was lost. Now, I want you to think for a moment about your own life. If you've been feeling emotionally disconnected, have you tried to open up and share how you really feel? Or have you kept everything to yourself, hoping time would somehow fix things? Don't fool yourself. Without emotional intimacy, any relationship becomes a shadow of what it could be. Don't let that happen. Before we move on to the next point, I want you to take a moment. If this video is making you reflect, subscribe to the channel and give it a like. Tell me where you're watching from, and leave a quick comment about your experience with emotional intimacy. Remember, the last lesson in this video is the most powerful. Don't miss it. After talking about the loss of emotional intimacy and the disconnection caused by isolation within the relationship, now we're diving into another mistake that can be even more subtle but devastating. This mistake is the fourth key point of this video, getting involved in other people's conflicts. It's a dangerous habit many fall into without realizing it, and over time, it erodes your dignity and personal autonomy. And the worst part is, when this happens, you end up living not your own life, but the life others have designed for you. It happens to all of us at some point. Your partner, your children, your friends, even close relatives ask you to step into their disputes. They expect you to take sides in arguments that have nothing to do with you, to act as a mediator in conflicts you didn't create. This kind of help might seem altruistic, even noble at first, but soon you realize it drags you into an endless cycle of anguish and emotional exhaustion. The worst part is that when you fall into this trap, you're not only emotionally invested in other people's struggles, but you also lose track of your own needs and priorities. The mistake here is believing that you are responsible for solving other people's problems. It's a mental trap that settles in so quietly you don't even realize what's happening. You start thinking that if you don't intervene, you'll be seen as selfish or indifferent. You believe that if you don't involve yourself in your loved ones' conflicts, you'll disappoint them, as if your worth as a person depended on your ability to solve their problems. But this mentality is toxic. The truth is, the more you get involved in other people's conflicts, the further you drift away from yourself, from what truly matters to you, from your own desires and needs. What seems like a good deed at first, helping those you love, ends up being a form of silent self-destruction. This pattern settles into your life without you noticing. It's like a plant that starts growing in the shadow of your being, something that seems small and harmless, but eventually grows to take up all the space. The mindset of, "I have to help fix this," becomes an invisible chain binding you to other people's responsibilities. And while you keep taking sides in battles that aren't yours, your own life fades away. You start feeling like you have no time for yourself, that all your effort is directed at putting out fires you didn't start. And the worst part is, when you do this, you're not only wasting your time, but also sacrificing your mental and emotional peace. You become a pawn in a game that isn't yours. Let's be realistic for a moment. How many times have you felt dragged into a family problem or a relationship dispute just because you felt pressured to do so? How many times have you made the effort to mediate something you had no business mediating, only to discover that not only did you fail to resolve anything, but you ended up feeling worse than before? This is the price we pay when we allow the fix everything mentality to take over. We forget that every individual has the responsibility to learn how to manage their own problems. And yes, it's hard to watch someone you care about suffer, but that doesn't mean your life should be the price for their suffering. What's really happening when you get involved in other people's conflicts is that instead of putting your energy into what truly matters to you, you're scattering your emotional and mental resources on something that's not your responsibility. You're sacrificing what makes you who you are for something beyond your control. And in the process, you lose the clarity needed to know what you truly need, what truly fulfills you and gives you peace. You start living for others, and somehow you forget to live for yourself. The lesson here is clear. You don't have to be the mediator in everyone else's struggles. Your life should not revolve around the expectations and demands of others. Instead of carrying responsibilities that aren't yours, it's essential to set clear boundaries, to say no when necessary, and to let others learn to solve their own problems. This is an act of self-love and respect. Because when you start putting yourself first, taking care of yourself, prioritizing your own interests and peace, you start living with authenticity and freedom. Don't become a spectator of your own life, trapped in the dramas of others. Your well-being doesn't lie in someone else's hands. It lies within yourself. We've reached the 5th point of this video, and I want you to be completely alert because this is a topic many prefer to ignore. But it drags relationships and individuals into a deep abyss, being asked to change your way of thinking or living. This is one of the most insidious forms of emotional manipulation. They ask you to stop being yourself, to adapt, to transform into something you're not just to fit their expectations. And believe me, that is a fatal mistake. What they're asking for isn't a small adjustment, it's a renunciation of your identity, an act of submission to someone else's control. The The problem with these kinds of demands is that if you give in, if you decide to adapt and change what defines you, what has shaped you throughout your life, what you've built with effort and sacrifice, you become a version of yourself that isn't real. The relationship then becomes an emotional prison. You're trapped between the need to please and the fear of losing the affection of the person asking you to become someone else. But the worst part is, in the process, you lose your self-respect. You lose the dignity that allows you to walk with your head held high. And when that happens, the love and respect you once had for yourself begin to fade away. If you fall into this trap, the consequences are devastating. First, you will lose your sense of identity. You become someone who lives to meet the expectations of others, and what once made you happy no longer makes sense. At some point, you no longer know who you are or what you want. You've lost your way. Second, you'll reach a point where you have nothing authentic left to offer. You'll be a false version of yourself, and this creates a deep disconnection with the other person because even if you're meeting their demands, it will never be enough. The emptiness keeps growing and frustrations build up. It's a downward spiral of dissatisfaction and emptiness. And the most terrifying part of all is that if this pattern isn't broken in time, it can become an endless cycle. Emotional dependency grows, and with it, the lack of respect. You find yourself trapped in a relationship where you will never be enough because there will always be something more you need to change, something more you need to sacrifice. They're asking you to transform, to adapt. But the truth is, there's no end to that request. There will always be something that doesn't fit their expectations. There will always be something more to change, and in the process, you're the one left feeling empty. So how do you break this destructive pattern? The answer isn't easy, and it can't be done overnight. The first step is to recognize that no one has the right to tell you how to live or how to think. No one, absolutely no one, has the right to ask you to stop being yourself to become what they want. This is about self-esteem and personal respect. You need to understand that your desires, your ideas, your habits, what makes you who you are, have immense value. You cannot allow another person to tell you that you need to change to make them feel comfortable. That is not love, that is control. And that control is what you must eradicate from your life if you ever want to find peace. To do this, you must adopt a mindset of emotional self-sufficiency. You must be capable of walking alone, of making decisions that make you feel good about yourself, even if it means disappointing others. If someone asks you to change something fundamental in your life, something that defines you, your response must be clear. I won't do it. I won't do it for anyone, and I won't do it to please someone else. Because if you accept that demand, if you give in to that pressure, what you're doing is giving up the most valuable thing you have, your authenticity, your freedom, and your self-respect. Breaking this pattern means stopping living according to the expectations of others and starting to live according to your own principles. It's easy to fall into the trap of being the person who always says yes to avoid conflict, but that's a form of emotional self-destruction. True strength lies in saying no when necessary, in standing firm in who you are, and in protecting what you've built in your life. It's not about being selfish, it's about being honest with yourself. Because when you stop being yourself to please others, you end up losing everything, and you can't let that happen. So, how do you reverse this situation? Start by taking control of your life. Do what makes you happy, do what gives you peace, without worrying about the expectations of others. Freedom begins with that decision to stop dragging yourself down by other people's demands. Because if you live according to what others expect from you, you will never truly live. You'll only be a shadow of what you could have been, and in the end, that shadow is all that will be left of you. We've talked about the importance of keeping your identity intact, of not giving in to emotional manipulation that demands you to change who you are. But the mistake many continue to make, the one people keep feeding day after day, is prioritizing other people's feelings over their own. This is the 6th point we need to face, and if you don't, I guarantee you'll keep falling into a spiral of frustration, emotional exhaustion, and worst of all, loss of respect. Because when you constantly put the needs and expectations of others above your own, you become nothing more than an accessory in someone else's life, a tool that only serves to make them feel good while you forget about yourself. Imagine for a moment you're in a relationship, maybe with a child, a partner, a close friend. They ask something of you, but it's not reasonable. It's not something that's good for you. They want you to make decisions that only benefit them, to sacrifice your desires and dreams just so they won't feel uncomfortable or disappointed. And deep down, you know it's not right, it's not what you want, it's costing you your peace. But for some reason, you choose to please them. You say yes, even though you don't mean it. You become a spectator in your own life, driven only by the expectations of others. Now picture the consequences of that decision. You keep giving, keep sacrificing, keep giving in. But over time, that yes you said turns into a burden. Suddenly, you don't even know who you are without the expectations of others. Your life is no longer your own, and everything you've worked so hard to build slowly crumbles. You become a shadow of what you could have been. And it's not that you don't want to help. It's not that you don't love those who keep asking more of you than you can give. But the truth is, when you keep saying yes, out of fear of disappointing others, what you're really doing is betraying yourself. The emotional exhaustion is brutal. Every time you prioritize someone else's feelings, a part of you shuts down. It's like you're sacrificing yourself on an altar that doesn't belong to you. The problem is, when you become the one who always gives in, you start losing yourself. How many times have you stopped doing something you enjoyed just to avoid making others uncomfortable? How many times have you silenced your desires because you thought their needs were more important? This doesn't just affect your life, it affects your happiness, your mental peace, your physical well-being. You become someone who lives for others, and over time, you realize you've lost the ability to say no without feeling guilty. Now, imagine a future where you keep walking down this path. You keep saying yes when you know you should say no. You keep making the same mistake, giving everything of yourself, hoping to receive something in return that never comes. You become a prisoner of others, and the saddest part is you don't even realize how you're falling apart. You slowly drain yourself because no one is asking you, how do you feel? No one is considering you in their decisions. No one is worrying about your well-being. And the worst part is, when you finally realize what's happening, it's already too late. You've sacrificed so much that all you're left with is a deep, overwhelming emptiness. The only way to break this destructive cycle is to stop living for others. Yes, it's a difficult process. Yes, it's uncomfortable. Because when you start setting boundaries, when you start saying no firmly and without guilt, the people around you may not understand it. But the only way to regain your self-respect, your mental peace, and your dignity is by establishing those boundaries. Self-love isn't selfishness, it's emotional survival. If you don't put yourself first, if you keep allowing others to live at your expense, all you'll achieve is ending up empty, without energy, without motivation, without direction. It's time for you to understand this once and for all. Your life is not here to meet other people's expectations. Stop putting everyone else's needs above your own. No one will take care of you like you will. If you keep sacrificing yourself for others, in the end, when everything falls apart, you'll be the only one left standing alone. Don't expect others to value you if you don't value yourself first. Don't risk your well-being just to please others. Life is short, and every day you spend not taking care of yourself, you're losing a piece of what you could become. We've talked about a lot today: the signs of a crumbling relationship, how the decisions you make now are building the future you will live, and the crucial importance of setting boundaries to regain self-respect. Now, we've reached the 7th and final point of this video, and it's the most important one. Change depends entirely on you. There are no excuses, no shortcuts. If you're waiting for something or someone to come and save you, you're fooling yourself. The only person who has the power to transform your life, to change your destiny, is you. And if you don't take control now, you never will. What you've learned today is powerful, but everything we've discussed means nothing if you don't take action. It's easy to listen to all this, nod your head, think, yes, that's true, and then go on with your life as if nothing has changed. But that's the mistake so many people make. They think change will happen on its own, that everything will work out if they just wait long enough. The truth is, if you don't do something now, if you don't decide to take the reins of your life, you will remain trapped in the same cycle of frustration, sacrifice, and despair. And the worst part is, when you finally reach the point where you realize what you've lost, it will be too late. The time you've wasted won't come back. The opportunities you let slip away will never return. Let me ask you, are you willing to live the rest of your life the same way? Are you going to keep letting others decide for you, manipulate you emotionally, make you feel like you don't have the right to be happy for yourself? If you don't face these realities, if you don't act now, then you will keep crawling through life, hoping something changes, while everything around you falls apart. The truth, as harsh as it may be, is that the change you desire will only come when you decide to stop being the victim and start being the owner of your own life. No one else will do it for you. Change begins with accepting one simple truth. You are responsible for your life, your decisions, and your happiness. No one else has the power to give your life direction. No one else has the right to decide for you. Self-love, emotional self-sufficiency, and self-respect don't come overnight, but they only emerge when you stop being a slave to other people's expectations. They only grow when you decide your well-being comes first, when you decide you will not allow anyone else to control your peace, your mind, or your heart. And yes, it's painful, and yes, you will feel alone at times, but that is the price you must pay to reclaim what is yours, your freedom. Remember this, you don't have time to waste. If you keep letting others use you, if you keep prioritizing their feelings over yours, if you keep living for everyone else, you will end up destroying yourself from the inside out. Can you imagine yourself 10, 20, 30 years from now, feeling just as empty, just as ignored, just as stripped of your dignity? You can't let that happen. If you want real change, if you want an authentic and fulfilling life, now is the time to act. No more excuses, no more reasons to keep living in someone else's shadow. The responsibility for your life is in your hands, and it's time to take it. Today, you have the chance to start over. Today, you have the opportunity to do what you always should have done. Be true to yourself, set clear boundaries, and stop pleasing others at the expense of your own well-being. No one is coming to save you. No one is going to fix what's already broken. Only you. Are you going to make that decision, or are you going to keep waiting for things to change on their own? The truth is, if you keep waiting, you'll remain stuck in the same place, suffering for the same reasons. This is your moment of transformation. Don't wait any longer. Life doesn't wait, and if you don't take control now, I assure you it won't change for you. So, make a decision today. Decide that from now on, you're the one who controls your life, not anyone else. Decide that you will no longer be a victim of circumstances, that you will be the protagonist of your own story. And when you do that, when you finally start living for yourself, change will be inevitable. If you've made it this far, it's because you're not someone who runs away from uncomfortable truths. Not everyone can handle what I've told you today, or face the harsh realities we often prefer to ignore. Most people choose to live in lies, in the comfort of not having to do anything to change, but you, being here, are making a decision to face yourself, to take control of your life, to not let others decide for you. That's an act of courage, even if you don't feel it now. And let me make this as clear as possible. The change you need will only happen if you act, if you stop waiting for something external to do it for you. I want you to leave a short but powerful phrase in the comments, something that sums up what you've learned today. Something like, "Change starts with me." And don't forget to mention where you're watching from. Because this isn't just another video. It's a call for those who have decided to wake up, who have decided to stop living under someone else's shadow. I'm Celia, And this is House of Wisdom. Here, we don't seek comfort or easy solutions. This channel exists because there's a group of people willing to face the truth, to leave complacency behind, and to live with the strength of those who have decided to take control of their destiny. We're not here to make things comfortable. We're here to help you change, to help you make the decisions that will lead you to become who you truly are. If this video made you reflect, subscribe to the channel and join this community of people who have decided to wake up. Share this content with someone who needs to hear these words, because it might be exactly what they need to change their life. We never know what a simple word of truth can do, so don't hesitate to share it. The conversation doesn't end here. I invite you to watch one of the videos that will appear on the screen, because what's coming next is even more essential for your transformation. Don't stop, keep moving forward. Your life can change today if you decide this is the moment.